Hello. So, I'm going to force I'd try recording the video again since you so kindly suggested it. We'll see how this works, shall we? Now, where we were, where I'm going to start, we had just left off the Rainwell traders talking to each other, and we're now going to chapter 4, bonds. Okay, so let's get it to rotate nicely for me. There we go. Briggs' hands rested on the spokes of Vivacious wheel, casually competent. The pirate's face had the distant look of a man completely aware of the ship as his larger body. Wintrow paused a moment to size him up before approaching. He was a young man, no more than 25. His chestnut hair was confined under a yellow kerchief marked with a raven insignia. His eyes were grey, and the old slave tattoo on his face had been overneedled with a dark blue raven that almost obscured it. Despite his youth, Brigg had a decisive air that made even older men jump to his orders. Kennet had chosen well in putting him in charge of the Vivacia until he recovered. Wintrow took a deep breath. He approached the older man with respect but dignity. He needed Brigg to recognize him as a man. Wintrow waited until the man's eyes swung to meet his own. Brigg looked at him silently. Wintrow spoke softly but clearly. "I need to ask you some questions." "Do you?" Brigg challenged. His eyes flicked away up to his lookout man. "I do," Wintrow replied firmly. "Your captain's leg gets no better. How much longer will it take us to get to Bull Creek?" "Day and a half," Brigg told him, after brief consideration. "Maybe 2. The expression on his face never seemed to change. Wintrow nodded to himself. "I think we can wait that long. There are supplies I'd like to have before I try to cut. I hope we can get them there. In the meantime, I could keep them stronger if I had better supplies." When the slaves rose up against the crew, they ransacked much of the ship. The medical chest has been missing since then. It would be very useful to me now. "No one's owned up to taking it?" Wintrow gave a small shrug. "I've asked, but no one has answered. Many of the freed slaves are reluctant to talk to me. I think Sardar's turning them against me." He hesitated. That sounded self-pitying. He would not gain Briggs' respect by whining. He went on more judiciously. "Maybe they do not realize what they have. Or, in the confusion of the storm and the uprising, someone may have taken it, discarded it, and it may have gone overboard." Wintrow took a breath and got back to his intent. "There were things in it that could make your captain more comfortable." Brigg tossed him a brief glance. He looked unconcerned, but he suddenly bellowed, "Cash!" Wintrow braced himself to be seized and hustled along. Instead, when the man appeared, Brigg ordered, "Shake down everyone on board. The medical chest is missing. If someone has it, I want it found. At the very least, I want to know who touched it last. Do it." "Aye," Kirsch replied, and hastened away. When Wintrow did not leave, Brigg sighed out through his nose. "Something else?" he demanded. "My father is—" "Ship!" the lookout suddenly sang out. An instant later he called, "Chalcedane galley, but flying the flag of the Sarchap's patrol. They're coming up fast with oars and sail. They must have been laying back in that inlet." "Damn," Briggs spat. "He did it. The son of a whore brought in Chalcedane mercenaries. Clear the decks," he suddenly roared. "Working crew only. Everyone else blown out of the way. Get some sail on." Wintrow was moving, sprinting towards the figurehead. He dodged men nimbly. The deck became as busy as a stirred ant's nest. Ahead of them, the Marietta was sheering off in one direction as Vivacia leaned in another. Wintrow gained the foredeck and then clung to the bow railing. Behind him, he heard thin shouts as the Chalcedane ship hailed him. Brigg did not bother to reply. "I don't understand," Vivacia called him. "Why do Chalcedane war galleys fly the Sarchap's colours?" "I heard rumours of it in Jamalia. Sarchap Cosgo hired Chalcedeans to patrol the inside passage. They're supposed to clear out the pirates, but that doesn't explain why they pursue us." "A moment." He flung himself into the rigging, scrabbling up to where he had a better view of what was going on. The Chalcedane ship in pursuit was built for warfare, not trade. In addition to her sail, 2 banks of slaves plied her oars. She was long and lean, and her decks swarmed with fighting men. The spring sunlight glinted on helms and swords. The Satrap's flag with the white spires of Jamelia on a blue field looked incongruous above the galley's blood-red sail. "He invites their warships into our waters?" Vivacia was incredulous. "Is he mad? The Chaldeans are without honour. This is like putting the thief to guard your warehouse." She glanced fearfully over her shoulder. "Do they pursue us?" "Yes," Wintrow said succinctly. His heart thundered within him. What should he hope? That they escaped cleanly, or that the Chaldean patrol boat caught them. The pirates would not surrender to Vivacia without a battle. There would be more bloodshed. If the Chaldeans prevailed, would they restore Vivacia to her legal owners? Perhaps. He suspected they would take the ship back to Jamelia for the Satrap's decision. The slaves huddled below decks would be enslaved once more, and they knew it. They would fight. The slaves outnumbered the boarders that the Chaldean vessel could be carrying, but they were unarmed and inexperienced. A great deal of bloodshed, he decided. So, should he urge Vivacia to flee or dawdle? Before he could even voice his uncertainty, the decision was snatched from him. The smaller, sleeker vessel, driven by oars as well as wind, was gaining on them. For the first time, Wintrow noted a cruel war ram at the bow of the galley. A flight of arrows rose from the Chaldean's deck. Wintrow cried out, a wordless warning to Vivacia. Some were aflame as they arced toward the ship. The first volley fell short, but they had made their intention plain. In a display of both seamanship and daring, the Marietta suddenly heeled over, changing her course into a curve that would take her behind Vivacia and right across the Chaldean ship's bow. Wintrow thought he glimpsed a pirate Sorko on the deck, exhorting his men to greater efforts. The Raven flag blossomed suddenly, a taunting challenge to the Chaldeans. For a moment, it gave Wintrow pause. What sort of a captain was this pirate Kenneth to be able to command such loyalty in his men? Sorko's plain intention was to draw the pursuit off his captain and to himself. From Wintrow's perch, he saw the Marietta rock suddenly as her deck-mounted catapults lofted a shower blast at the patrol vessel. Some of the stones fell short, sending white gouts of water leaping from the waves, but a satisfying amount of it rattled down onto the decks of the galley. It wrought havoc among the oarsmen. The steady beating of the oars suddenly looked like the wild scrabbling of a many-legged insect. The gap between the patrol vessel and Vivacia steadily and swiftly widened. The Marietta did not look as though she were staying to fight. Having worked her mischief, she was now piling on canvas and fleeing. As the galley regained the beat of its oars, it shot off in pursuit of her. Wintrow strained to see, but the helmsman was taking Vivacia to the lee of an island. His view was blocked. He suddenly understood the ruse. The Vivacia would be taken swiftly out of sight, while the Marietta lured the pursuit well away. He clambered down to drop lightly to the deck. "Well, that was interesting," he remarked wryly to Vivacia, but the ship was distracted. "Kenneth," she replied. "What about him?" Wintrow asked. "Boy!" The woman's sharp voice came from behind him. He turned to see Etta glaring at him. "Captain wants you. Now!" She spoke peremptorily, but her eyes were not on him. Her gaze locked with Vivacia's. The figurehead's face grew impassive. "Wintrow, stand still," she ordered him softly. Vivacia lifted her voice to speak to the pirate. "His name is Wintrow Vestrit," she pointed out to Etta with patrician disdain. "You will not call him boy." Vivacia shifted her eyes to Wintrow. She smiled at him benignly and politely observed, "I hear Captain Kenneth calling for you. Would you go to him, please, Wintrow?" "Immediately," he promised and complied. As he walked away from them, he wondered what Vivacia had been demonstrating. He would not make the mistake of thinking that she had been defending him from Etta. No, that exchange had been about the struggle for dominance between the two females. In her own way, Vivacia had asserted that Wintrow was her territory and that she expected Etta to respect that. At the same time, it had pleased her to reveal to the woman that the ship was aware of what went on in the captain's stateroom. From the spasm of anger that had passed over Etta's features, he deduced she was not pleased by it. He glanced back over his shoulder at them. Etta had not moved. He heard no voices, but they could have been speaking softly. He was struck again by the pirate woman's extraordinary appearance. Etta was tall, her long limbs spare of flesh. She wore her silk blouse and brocaded vest and trousers as casually as if they were simple cotton garments. Her sleek black hair was cut off short, not even reaching her shoulders. She offered neither roundness nor softness to suggest femininity. Her dark eyes were dangerous and feral. From what Winter had seen of her, she was savagely tempered and remorseless as a cat. Not one sign of tenderness had he seen in a woman. Nevertheless, all those traits contradicted themselves, combining to make her overwhelmingly female. Never before had Winter sensed such power in a woman. He wondered if Vivacia would win her battle of wills with Etta. Kenneth was indeed calling his name, not loudly, but with a panting intensity. Winter did not knock, but entered immediately. The tall, lean pirate was supine on the bed, but there was nothing restful about his attitude. His hands clutched the sheets, knuckles white, as if he were a woman in labour. His head was thrown back against the dishevelled pillows. The bared muscles of his chest stood out strongly. His gaping mouth gulped air spasmodically. His chest heaved up and down with the effort. His dark hair and open shirt were soaked in sweat. The sharp tang of it filled the cabin. "Wintro!" Kenneth gasped out yet again as he reached the bedside. "I'm here." Instinctively, he took one of the pirate's calloused hands in his own. Kenneth gripped Wintro's hand in so violent a clench it was all he could do to keep from crying out. Instead, he returned the grip, deliberately pinching down hard between the pirate's thumb and fingers. With his other hand, he wrapped Kenneth's wrist. He tried to set his fingers to the pirate's pulse, but that man's bracelet was in the way. He contented himself with moving his hand to Kenneth's forearm. Rhythmically, he tightened and then loosened his grip in a slow, calming pattern, while he maintained the pinch of Kenneth's hand that was supposed to lessen pain. He dared to sit down on the edge of the bed, leaning over Kenneth so that he could meet the tortured man's eyes. "Watch me," he told him. "Breathe with me, like this." Wintrow took a slow, steadying breath, held it for a count, and then slowly released it. Kenneth made a faint effort to copy him. His breath was still too short and too brisk, but Wintrow nodded encouragingly at him. "That's right. That is right. Take control of your body. Pain is only the tool of your body. You can master it." He held the pirate's gaze steady with his own. With every breath he expelled soothing confidence and belief so that Kenneth might breathe in. Wintrow centered himself within his own body, finding a core that touched his heart and both his lungs. He let the focus of his eyes soften, drawing Kenneth's gaze deeper into his own, so that he could share his calmness with the man. He tried to make his gaze draw Kenneth's pain out, and let it disperse in the air between them. The simple exercises drew his mind back to his monastery. He tried to imbibe peace from those memories, to add their strength to what he was trying to accomplish. Instead, he suddenly felt a charlatan. What was he doing here? Mimicking what he had seen old Sapate do with the patients in pain? Was he trying to make Kenneth believe he was truly a priest-healer instead of a brown-robed acolyte? He did not have the complete training to do this simple pain alleviation, let alone remove a diseased leg. He tried to tell himself he was simply doing the best he could to help Kenneth. He wondered if he were being honest with himself. Perhaps he was only trying to save his own skin. Kenneth's grip on his hands slowly lessened. Some of the tension left his neck, and his head lowered back into his damp pillows. His breathing grew slower. It was the laboured breathing of a man fighting exhaustion. Wintrow kept possession of his hand. Sapate had spoken of a technique for lending strength to the suffering, but Wintrow's learning had not progressed that far. He had expected to be an artist for Sa, not a healer. Still, as he clasped Kenneth's sweating hand between his own, he opened his heart to Sa and begged that the Father All would intervene. He prayed that his mercy would supply what Wintrow lacked in learning. "I can't go on like this." From another man, the words might have sounded pitiful or pleading. Kenneth spoke them as a simple statement of fact. The pain was ebbing, or perhaps his ability to respond to it was exhausted. He closed his dark eyes, and Wintrow felt suddenly isolated. Kenneth spoke quietly but clearly. "Take the leg off, today, as soon as possible, now." Wintrow shook his head, then spoke the denial aloud. "I can't. I don't have half of what I need. Briggs said that Bull Creek is only a day or two away. We should wait." Kenneth's eyes snapped open. "I know that I can't wait," he said bluntly. If it's just the pain, then perhaps some rum, Wintrow began, but Kenneth's words overrode his own. The pain is bad, yes, but it's my ship and my command that suffer the worst right now. They sent a boy to tell me the patrol ship. All I did was try to stand. I fell. Right in front of him, I collapsed. I should have been on the deck as soon as the lookout spotted that sail. We should have turned and cut the throats of every Chastain pig aboard that galley. Instead we fled. I left Brig in command and we fled. Sorko had to fight my battle. In addition, all aboard know of it. Every slave on board the ship has a tongue. No matter where I leave them off, every one of them will wag the news that Captain Kennett fled the Tarchuk's patrol ship. I can't allow that. In an introspective voice, he observed, I could drown them all. Wintrow listened in silence. This was not the suave pirate who had courted his ship with extravagant words, nor the controlled captain. This was the man beneath that facade, exposed by pain and exhaustion. Wintrow realized his own vulnerability. Kenneth would not tolerate the existence of anyone who had seen him as he truly was. Right now, Kenneth seemed unaware of how much he was revealing. Wintrow felt like the mouse, pinioned by the snake's stare. As long as he kept still, he had a chance to remain undetected. The pirate's hand grew lax in his grip. Kenneth turned his head on his pillow and his eyes began to sag shut. Just as Wintrow began to hope he might escape, the door to the cabin opened. Etta entered. She took in the room at a glance. What did you do to him? She demanded as she crossed to Kenneth's bedside. Why is he so still? Wintrow lifted a finger to his lips to shush her. She scowled at that, but nodded. With a jerk of her hand, she indicated the far corner of the room. She frowned at how slowly he obeyed her, but Wintrow took his time, easing the pirate's hand down gently on the quilt and then sliding slowly off the bed, so that no movement might disturb Kenneth. It was all in vain. As Wintrow left his bedside, Kenneth said, You will cut off my leg today. Etta gave a horrified gasp. Wintrow turned back slowly to the man. Kenneth had not opened his eyes, but he lifted a long-fingered hand and pointed at him unerringly. Gather what you have for tools and such. Get the job done. What we do not have, we must do without. I want to be finished with this, one way or another. Sir, Wintrow agreed. He changed course, moving hastily toward the door. As swiftly, Etta moved to block him. He found himself looking up into eyes as dark and merciless as a hawk's. He squared his shoulders for a confrontation. Instead, he saw something like relief in her face. Let me know how I can help you, she said simply. He bobbed a nod to her request, too shocked to reply, and slipped past her and out the door. A few steps down the companionway he halted. He leaned against the wall and allowed the shaking to overtake his body. The bravado of his earlier bargain overwhelmed him. What had been bold words would soon become a bloody task. He had said he would set a knife to Kenneth's flesh, would slice into his body and cut through his bone and separate his leg. Wintrow shook his head before the enormity of the situation could cow him. There is no path but forward, he counselled himself, and hastened off to find Brig. As he went, he prayed the medicine chest had been found. Captain Finney put down his mug, licked his lips, and grinned at Brashen. You're good at this, you know that? I suppose. Brashen reluctantly acknowledged the compliment. The smuggler laughed throatily. But you don't want to be good at it, do you? Brashen shrugged again. Captain Finney mimicked his shrug, and then went off into hoarse laughter. Finney was a brawny, whiskery-faced man. His eyes were bright as a ferret's above his red-veined nose. He poured his mug about on the ring-stained table, then evidently decided he had had enough beer this afternoon. Pushing the mug to one side, he reached for the Sindin humidor instead. He twisted the filigreed glass stopper out of the dark wooden container. He turned it on its side and gave it a shake. Several fat sticks, the drug, popped into view. He broke a generous chunk off one and then offered the humidor to Brashen. Brashen shook his head mutely, then tapped his lower lip significantly. A little plug of the stuff was still burning pleasantly there. Rich, black, and tarry was a Sindin that was sending tendrils of well-being throughout his bones. Brashen retained enough wit to know that no one was bribed and flattered unless the other party wanted something. He wondered hazily if he would have enough willpower to oppose Finney if necessary. Sure, you won't have a fresh cut? No, thanks. No, you don't want to be good at this trade. Finney went on as if he had never interrupted himself. He leaned back heavily in his chair and took a long breath in through his open mouth to speed the Sindin's effect. He sighed out again. For a moment all was silent, save for the slapping of the waves against the spring-eave's hull. The crew was ashore, filling water casks at the little spring Finney had shown them. Brashen knew that as mate he should be overseeing that operation, but the captain had invited him to his cabin. Brashen had feared Finney had a grievance with him. Instead it had turned into drinking and Sindin at midday on his own watch. Shame on you, Brashen Trell, he thought to himself, and smiled bitterly. What would Captain Vestrit think of you now? He lifted his own mug again. You want to go back to Bingtown, don't you? Finney cocked his head and pointed a thick finger at Brashen. If you had your wishes, that's what you'd do. Pick up where you left off. You was quality there. You tried to deny it, but it's all over you. You weren't born to the waterfront. Don't suppose it matters what I was born to. I'm here now. Brashen pointed out with a laugh. The Sindin was uncoiling inside him. He was grinning, matching the smile on Finney's face. He knew he should worry that Finney had figured out he was from Bingtown, but he thought he could deal with it. Exactly what I was about to tell you. See that? See, you're smart. Many men, they can't accept where they end up. They always go moping after the past or mooning towards the future, but men like us, he slapped the table resoundingly, men like us can grab what we're offered and make a go of it. So, you're going to offer me something? Brashen hazarded slyly. Not exactly. It's what we can offer each other. Look at us. Look at what we do. I take the spring eve up and down this coast, in and out of lots of little towns. I buy stuff, I sell stuff, and I don't ask too many questions. I carry a good supply of fine trade goods, so I get the deals. I get fine quality stuff. You know that's true. It's true, Brashen agreed easily. Now was not the time to point out the pedigree of the goods they trafficked in. The spring eve and Finney traded throughout the pirate isles, buying up the best of the pirate stolen goods and reselling them to a go-between in Candletown. From there they were passed off as legitimate goods in other ports. Brashen didn't know much more than that, and he didn't really care. He was mate in the spring eve. In exchange for that, and for acting as a bodyguard on occasion, he got his room, board, a few coins, and some really good Sindin. There wasn't much else a man needed. The best, Finney repeated. Damn good stuff, and we take all the risks of getting it. Us, you and I. Then we take that stuff back to Candletown, and what do we get there? Money? A pittance. We bring in a fat pig and they throw us back the bones. But together, Brashen, you and I could do better for ourselves. How do you figure? This was starting to make him nervous. Finney had an interest in the spring eve, but he didn't own it. Brashen didn't want any part of genuine piracy. He'd already done his share of that early in life. He'd had a gut full of it back then. No, this trading in stolen goods was as close as he wanted to get to it. He might not be the respectable first mate of the live ship Vivacia anymore. He wasn't even the hard-working second mate for a slaughter ship like the Reaper anymore. But he hadn't sunk so low as piracy. You got that look to you, like I said. You were trader-born, ain't you? Probably a younger son or something. But you would have the connections in Bingtown, if you wanted to use them. We could take a good haul up there. You would hook us up. And we could trade some top-quality merchandise for some of that magical stuff that the traders have. Them singing chimes and perfumed gems and whatnot. No, Brashen heard. Too late how abrupt his reply was. Quickly he softened it. It's a good idea. A brilliant idea, except for one thing. I don't have any connections. In a burst of generosity that was probably due to the Sindin, he gifted Finney with the truth. You're right, I'm trader-born. But I tangled those lines a long time ago. My family cut me loose. I couldn't get a glass of water begging my dar's door, let alone cut you a trade deal. The way my father feels about me, he wouldn't piss on me if I was on fire. Finney guffawed and Brashen joined with a wry smile. He wondered why he spoke of such things at all, let alone why he made them a cause for levity. Better than being a crying drunk, he supposed. He watched Finney compose himself, laugh once more, and then take another drink of his beer. He wondered if the older man still had a father of his own somewhere. Perhaps he had a wife and children too. Russian knew next to nothing about him. It was better so. If he had an ounce of sense, he'd get up now, say he had to check on the crew, and leave before he told Finney any more about himself. Instead, he spat the soggy remains of the Sindin into the bucket under the table and reached for the humidor. Finney grinned at him as Russian broke another plug from the stick. Wouldn't have to be your own father. Man like you as chums, old friends, huh? Or you know someone with a bent for this. You've heard rumours about him. In any town, there are some that wouldn't mind adding a few coins to their purses quiet-like. We could go in there once or twice a year with a load of our very best, held back from our usual buyers. Not a lot, but of the finest quality, and that's what we would ask in return. Confidentially. Only you and I would need to know. Okay, I think I have to stop there. I've got to head out for the evening. But I hope that was okay. I hope the audio recorded, because that would be horrible if not. Let's try. Let's find out.